Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast, and glad to have on our guy, kind of our college basketball go-to, Big Ten basketball go-to now. That's Isaac Trotter, 24/7 Sports. How much fun are you having with the transfer portal? Some people aren't having fun, but other people are having a lot of fun. How about you, Trotter?
I'll be honest, man. It's almost giving the regular season a run for its money. It's so fun to have verbal commits open on TweetDeck, and it never ends. There's 100 different transfers, and it's so fun to play around with it. It feels a little bit like a video game, right? You're like, oh, well, what would this kid look like on that team, or what would this add? And you can just kind of see all of these different things, and it's really fun. And I think it's really stressful for coaches. I think it's probably really stressful for players. But I will say college basketball right now is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds in the offseason. And that's a really good thing for the sport. And so it might be frustrating for a lot of people right now, but it's also super fun because you're going to get a lot of interest in it. And a lot of people care right now, which other times it'd be easy to get lost in the NBA playoffs and some of the things that are going on right now in the beginning of May.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some winners and losers in all of this, right? I think one of the big losers is probably high school prospects, right? Because there are certainly a lot of scholarships open right now, but everyone wants to kind of keep these open, maybe not take the flyer on a Brandon Lieb, right? Or Matisse Vasile. And maybe that's a good thing for the coaches that they're not investing in guys that might not work out. But I think that's one of the losers. I would imagine the mid-majors are mostly losers here. But if you're at the top of the food chain, that includes in Illinois and most of these high major programs, it seems like this is probably a good thing for them, because if they have a guy who's not getting playing time or won't get playing time, they generally leave, and then you can probably upgrade in the portal here, Isaac.
Yeah, it feels like there's no such thing as a rebuild anymore either. There's just so many retools that you can do. I think that the thought process of spending 2 to 3 years to rebuild a program has to be a little outdated now. With the transfer portal, with how it's popping, you can change a team around right away. I mean, we saw with Iowa State what they did, but that was a little bit of an outlier too, right? But they're you look at Memphis, they brought in a lot of transfers. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Texas brought in a ton of transfers, oh man, they're a top 5 team. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but if you get it right and you find the right formula, you can be really competitive. I think there's a difference between building a team out of the transfer portal that can win a national title and building a team out of the transfer portal that can be really competitive. And I think you can do that right now. So I think the floor is so much higher because you're getting proven guys. And let's be honest, there's way more talent than there are spots right now. There's some really talented guys that are going to some lower levels. For example, Eric Gaines is a kid at LSU who was a jump out of the gym guy. He was in the NCAA tournament against Iowa State. He put his head on the rim and blocked this shot in the NCAA tournament. And everyone's like, oh my God, where's he playing right now? UAB. That's what I'm talking. There's so much talent and so few spots. So I feel like the floor for some of these teams is so much higher, and you can retool a team in a hurry.
Yeah. And you've been covering this from a national level, Isaac. I'm wondering, whose approach to this has interested you the most? Whose approach are you oh, I don't know what they're doing there? Because Texas, I mean, last year you were talking about, I don't know if it's a failure of what they did last year. They got a 6 seed. They were relevant, right? They were ranked most of the year. But a lot of people were expecting them to be a national title, and UNC added a bunch of transfers. It worked out. Some of the transfers themselves didn't work out, but Brady Maddox certainly was a success. So what kind of approach are you seeing that works, and what kind of approach are you seeing that doesn't work?
Well, the one approach, it's kind of weird. It's the team that's dominated the transfer portal is Arkansas. And at the same time, I'm looking at it, I'm going, what are you doing? How are these guys hopping on board? Because for me, I'm all about fit and potential and what minutes you could get. And that feels like that such stuff matters more to me than, hey, I'm hopping on Arkansas because it's really fun to be there. And I really like Eric Musselman. And hey, look at how packed their stands are and all these things. It feels like they were able to convince a lot of really talented guys to come in. And I'm just looking at the numbers crunch and going, you guys aren't going to play, because you also brought in 3 McDonald's All-Americans and 6 top 100 recruits.
It feels like Texas last year, right? They added everybody. It felt like everybody was going to Texas. What was it? 6 of the top 30 guys. It's are you all going to play?
Yeah. And so it feels like there's this crunch here where I don't know what the Arkansas staff is saying, but you're probably selling a lot of these guys saying, hey, come on in. Our program's great. Our fit is awesome. Look at the offense we run and all these great things. And I'm looking at it and going, okay, Jalen Williams is coming back. You have Devontae Davis is coming back. You go, this roster doesn't look like a roster that's going to have room for 16 guys to come in and play. It just isn't going to work. So that's the interesting thing. The one other thing that I really like is I think the teams that are being patient right now are really impressive, because it takes a lot of discipline not to be super aggressive in the transfer portal and go after some really nice names, because we're about to get a whole nother wave. And Brad Underwood has talked about that. But I think the teams that are patient right now and looking at this NBA draft and the guys that are going to come out of it could prove to get some really big pieces and have some pieces lined up. So Arkansas might dominate it now. And I love that roster. That's a number one team in the country next year. But it feels like the transfers who are taking their time and finding the spot that maybe isn't the biggest name, but has the best role, best fit, best opportunity, best coaching staff, those are the ones that are going to really succeed. And I think when we look back at that, the hit rate on those will be a little bit better than the ones who just went to the big name and joined a big recruiting class and a big transfer portal class and maybe didn't get to play as much.
Well, looky here, Isaac, after getting Terrence, Shannon, Illinois is number one currently. This could all change, but currently in the Big Ten transfer recruiting ranking. So if you go to 24/7, we now separate it recruit, transfer, and you can combine the two. And right now, Illinois is top 10 in all of those categories right now. But Terrence Shannon, obviously a huge addition to add to Dane Danger, the mid-year Baylor post-transfer. But that's a nice start to this class to add on top of the recruits they already added. But what do you think? No matter how they got him, Michigan, if they thought they were getting him or not, Illinois does stay patient. They go after one of their top targets instead of maybe just going down, getting a guy to fill a spot. And they get one of the top 10 transfers, according to 24/7 Sports. What do you think of that addition and what he adds?
Yeah, I think it's a huge one. And I think it really signals the start of something different. You're going to play different defensively. You're going to play different with pace. You're going to play different with tempo. And I think you're starting to see a Brad Underwood roster start to look a little bit more like what he wants. Is Kofi Coburn necessarily a Brad Underwood big man? I don't know, but he tailored his entire system around him. So now I think we're going to be able to see something a little bit different. And at the beginning of the offseason, when Brandon Murray and Terrence Shannon Jr. came in, what was the narrative? Get one of those guys. Ultimately, you got one of those guys. No matter how it happened, you got him. And so that's the most important thing right now. And I think you look at this roster and go, man, they could play some defense next year. Some really, really good defense. And we talk everything about switch everything. And that's such an easy thing to say. Oh, we can switch everything 1 through 5. Well, that's easier said than done. And I think now you're starting to see the personnel come together where you can put Terrence Shannon Jr. on the best ball handler on the other team. And you can put RJ Melendez on maybe the best wing on the other team. And you might be able to not necessarily hide, but you're going to be able to give Sky Clark and Jaden Epps a little bit of a balance where they don't have to go up against some of these elite ball handlers or some of the elite wings and expect to defend and shut them down. You have guys who can do that, and they can kind of learn the defense and learn the rotations and learn where to be and what to do on some of the lesser guys or on just shooters who aren't going to take them off the bounce. So I just feel like this gives this roster so much more versatility. And this is a top 25 team. And if they add a couple more right pieces with Terrence Shannon Jr. in the fold, like there's no reason why Illinois can't flirt with being number one in the Big Ten when it's all said and done.
What do you think? I mean, obviously Terrence Shannon gives Illinois just a proven player, a roster that needs proven players, because Coleman Hawkins is pretty proven, and we expect him to take a step up. We all expect RJ Melendez to take a huge, significant step up and potentially be a double-digit scorer, but he's still got to do it, right? And we all know Sky Clark and Jaden Epps can make an immediate impact. You're hopeful for Dane Danger, but he's only played 9 more college minutes than Sky Clark at this point, right? So there's a lot of potential there. But Terrence Shannon comes in and he's immediately the most proven player on this roster. Does he have another step to him? Like how much can he improve? What more can he add to his game at Illinois?
He is such a polished player when he gets in the right spots. Like when he gets in transition, he's heading downhill. He's really nasty. And I think he's going to put some guys on posters this year, and it's going to be really fun. He's really good defensively with the way he locks in. There's different aspects to his game though, where he can improve. Like the catch and shoot stuff is really good. He's comfortable in the pick and roll though. I think that's one thing that like we talk about, Jaden Epps and Sky Clark are going to have the ball in their hands a lot. But I think there's a potential where Terrence Shannon Jr. is also capable to run pick and roll, and you can run some 5-out stuff where he can mismatch hunt and find a way to get some advantages. We can go down the list in the Big Ten. Every team in the Big Ten is going to have a defender that you go, I can take him one-on-one. Terrence Shannon Jr. is going to come into Illinois next year and go, look at this roster, look at how young it is, look at how unproven it is, and go, I'm the best player on this team. And you need somebody who has that alpha in him. And Terrence Shannon Jr. does not lack that at all. So there's different parts of his game that need to be refined. Like, obviously you want the mid-range jumper to get a little bit better. You want him to continue to finish at the rim. You want him to take those good shots, not force it. There were times that last year when you watch Texas Tech play where it's like, I want to be the guy so bad. Like, I just need to take this and make this big shot. He doesn't need to do that at Illinois, but if you can start to help him with those efficiency numbers by taking the right shots, taking the good shots, I think you could see a guy that could compete for being all Big Ten this year and honestly be the best player on this team. Now we'll have to see what the other additions in the transfer portal look like and what this roster looks like in November, but he's going to come in saying, hey, I'm the best player on this team. And honestly, he has a talent to do it too.
He just seems like such a seamless fit. Like, if you needed a puzzle piece on the wing, he seems like the exact kind of guy. Big, athletic, can shoot it from three, but he's also not stepping on the toes, I don't think, of the guards who are coming in, because he's not a primary ball handler. And I think he and RJ Melendez certainly can play together. He played with all those guys at Texas Tech. There were 4 other RJ Melendezes at Texas Tech. So that's another part I really, really like about this addition is, man, you could have a lineup where Terrence Shannon and RJ Melendez are the 3 and 4, and you got Coleman at the 5, or Danger at the 5, or insert transfer here at the 5. And then you can have a lineup where Melendez and Shannon are the 2 and 3. And as you talked about, we keep using the word versatility and switchability and all those things. He's a key component of all of that.
Well, and one other thing too that I noticed is, like, if you've seen teams, sometimes when you get beat by a team, you go, man, their scheme was really good. I'd like to take a little bit of that. And I wonder if in the back of Brad Underwood's mind, he watched Houston and saw what Houston did and said, I'd kind of like a little bit of that. And so I look at Dane Danger or Coleman Hawkins or insert transfer portal big, whoever that is. You're probably not going to have a defender that can go up against TJD and against Hunter Dickinson and go one-on-one and just, hey, it's just one-on-one. But now with the length that you have, I think Illinois could get back to where they could really blitz those post-ups and force TJD to make tough passes, force Hunter Dickinson to make contested passes. And you're not making him pass those passes over a 6-foot Trent Frazier or a 6'3" DeMonte Williams with long arms. You're making him do it over a 6'6" Terrence Shannon Jr. who's blitzing that, or Coleman Hawkins is coming over to blitz those post-ups. So I just feel like this could be a really interesting thing where Illinois could get back to forcing more turnovers and forcing some real hell and havoc on the defensive end, similar to what Houston did, and making your best players turn into passers, not scorers. Make TJD a passer, not a scorer. Make Hunter Dickinson a passer, not a scorer. And that could kind of help this team get into transition more, which is something they didn't get to do a lot of last year.
Yeah, I think even if they add a guy in the portal, they're probably not going to have a one-on-one matchup you like against Zach Edey. Barely anyone does, or Hunter Dickinson. But yeah, you could do a lot of other things where you can have huge advantages elsewhere, potentially even on the offensive end at the 5 as well. All right, so let's talk about what is next. Like, what's number one thing you would go for in the portal? Is it a guard, a veteran guard, or is it a front court presence?
I would prefer a front court presence. And I think the 2 that stand out right now are Pete Nance and Matthew Meyer. A little bit like Brandon Murray and Terrence Shannon Jr., it doesn't matter one of the 2. I think if you get one of those guys, you can kind of fix and implement things a little bit differently. I think if you added Pete Nance, you'd probably be a little bit better defensively, because Nance is one of those guys that you could play one-on-one against a Trace Jackson Davis. And then you have Coleman Hawkins like roaming as the roamer to come over and help double or come potentially block shots. Like, he's one of your best rim protectors too. So I think if you add Nance, you add a little bit more defensively. If you add Matthew Meyer, that's a guy who's a beast. Like, I get some of the shooting percentages were down, but the way he cuts off the basketball, the way he moves when the ball's not in his hands, the way he passes, his feel for the game, he's 6'9". He plays like a guard. You could play 5 out with him. Let's be honest. Zach Edey wants nothing to do with guarding Matthew Meyer on the perimeter. Nothing. Matthew Meyer would look at him like food and start going to work to try to take advantage of that. So I look at both of those 2 guys as big time pieces, because, some of these ball handlers, like, you definitely want RJ Melendez to take a step forward as a ball handler. I feel pretty confident that Terrence Shannon Jr. is going to be a better ball handler than what some of the moments you had last year. And you definitely don't want to get into a situation where a guy like DeMonte Williams has to dribble the ball up last year, right? Like, we saw that. I think this year you start to have the depth in that backcourt where you have enough ball handlers. But if you could add one more post presence just to just to make Dane Danger's life a little bit easier and be like, hey man, you play 17 minutes really hard, and that's all we need from you. That's it. Just 17 minutes of all out effort. You don't need to play 27 minutes a night. And just adding another Swiss Army piece where you could get like really long, really athletic, really versatile, like a Nance and like a Meyer. Those would be really, really ideal fits, but it's not going to be easy because both those two guys are, a lot of people like them for a reason.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. You'd love to add both, right? You'd love to add some kind of veteran presence to the backcourt because when you do need some depth there. I mean, with 9 scholarship guys and only 3 of them guards and none of them with college experience, you would like some depth there. But I think front court is definitely the big piece because, hey, I think Coleman Hawkins is going to be a 25 to 30 minute a game guy. Like I never understood why he would want to leave in the transfer portal, despite whoever they could add, because he can fit with so many different pieces. But Dane Danger, despite Brad Underwood giving some offseason hype, as he generally does about his additions, I think Dane Danger could be a very good player. He's played 9 minutes of college basketball, right? Plus, there's a depth thing. If you have an injury in the front court, Brandon Lieb has to play. And Brandon Lieb seems to be working hard, all those things. But I didn't see anything that says he's ready for a huge role on a Big Ten team. So you absolutely need to add a piece that I think has to play 20 to 25 minutes a game. And I think Pete Nance is probably the ideal ad, right? When you think of on paper, what works, right? He's a stretch 5. He can hit threes. He's great in the elbow, the pinch post area, but he also can post people up, right? And he and Coleman Hawkins could work really well together. And as you said, I think he's an underrated defender, and he's just a proven Big Ten commodity that has a potential NBA ceiling. So I think he's kind of the ideal on paper ad. Matthew Meyer would be a heck of a lot of fun though, wouldn't he? I mean, if you watched him play, he's a heck of an entertaining watch. He's really athletic, can take people off the bounce, and he's unbelievable defensively. Like I just think you have him, Hawkins, Shannon, Melendez, what you could do defensively with that group. And offensively, I just think you'd be a blast to watch in transition. You can really spread it out with all those guys. And I think you take better shots this year. I think especially with the guards that Illinois will have, but he can force some things up when he goes into isolation ball, but either of those guys would be a massive addition. But I think there's got to be a lot of appeal. I don't know why Meyer would leave Baylor. It seems like there's a really good thing there, but Pete Nance would make a heck of a lot of sense to go to Illinois. And if Illinois can land Meyer, I mean, either of those guys, I agree with you. If they had one of those guys, I think they're a top 5 Big Ten team.
Agreed. Well, and there's 2 points. The thing about Nance too, I think there's untapped upside here because let's remember the guards that he was playing with at Northwestern.
Check it out.
All right. The jokes about Auburn's guards last year were very fair with Jabari Smith. They were even worse with Northwestern. Northwestern guard and Auburn's guards are real similar. Chuck it. I got this. Boo Booey dribbling up the lane. Chase Audige did not meet a 17-foot fall away over multiple defenders that he didn't love.
I wish I had the overconfidence the Northwestern guards had, right? I wish I just had that kind of confidence in myself that I'm better than I actually am.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And you definitely need a little bit of it. But Pete Nance was their best player and needed shots. And your boy Ryan Young needed shots. And so that's where I look at Nance and I go, there's something different here. If you could get him in the right scheme with some guards that are really talented where he can be best utilized and he's not necessarily put in some bad situations. There are times last year where, Boo Booey's dribbling, pounding it 100 times a possession, and Nance gets the ball with 4 seconds on the shot clock. It's like, go to work. And it's like, that's just not ideal all the time. So I do think that Nance can add a different part. The thing too about Meyer though, if you add one of those 2 guys, it doesn't matter, one of these 2 guys, the way that Illinois played last year, especially at the end of the year, was a little stagnant. Post Kofi, 4 out, find a shooter, hit a 3. That was kind of what it felt like. And I feel like if you add a person or a piece like Meyer or Nance, you have so many different ways that you can play. You can attack in different ways. I think this would be a really transition-heavy team with a lot of athletes. Defensively, you're trapping things. You have the length to be in the passing lanes. You can get aggressive out on the perimeter because you have Coleman Hawkins and Pete Nance who can both protect the rim. Like, it just feels like this team could completely change how they play. Maybe it's a different style. Maybe they're not quite as good at the beginning as they mesh the pieces together. But there's an ideal outcome here where it's a better, more upside team at the end of the year with more talent in March. And if that's what you're building for, and you need 6 different game plans to win 6 different games in the NCAA tournament, that roster looks more like it than what you had last year, where it felt like, well, Kofi's going to do his thing, and God, let's hope we make some threes. And that was your offensive game plan.
Yeah, defensively too, you can be more versatile. Though defensively, that was kind of what they hung their hat on toward the end of last year. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a less consistent team, especially early on. We know that, but you hope it's got a higher upside when it matters the most, right? And I think that's how they want to play moving forward. And if you can keep adding talent like they're adding, top 10 recruiting haul, then you got a chance to do it here. Last one for you, Isaac, about Illinois, and that's, we talked about the guards. I think there's 2 really intriguing guys out there, and Courtney Ramey of Texas, but I think there's a lot of teams that want a 4-year starting guard that's just solid, right? Good catch and shooter, great defender. And then Malachi Smith, we saw from Chattanooga, didn't have a greatest efficient night against Illinois, and that's what you'd be concerned about if he does go up a level. I'm shocked he hasn't gone to South Carolina already to follow Lamont Paris there, but a Belleville kid that could make some sense. That will be interesting to see if they can add somebody like that, knowing Jaden Epps and, obviously Sky Clark are coming along with Sincere Harris, or if they want to, or if they're just going to hand the keys over to the freshman. I think even if you just added some mid-major guard who wants to prove himself as a rotation guy that can play some defense, maybe catch and shoot, I think that'd be a great addition. Like just adding another solid piece, even if it's not a Courtney Ramey or a Malachi Smith, though those guys would be pretty good.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where I feel like this is where when Brad Underwood talks about culture, that's where it really matters here, because you have to be on the right page. You can't bring in a guy like I made the joke about Ramey. Like if Ramey comes in, he's going to look at all of these freshmen and be like, you guys are going to play over me. Like I'm an all Big 12 defender. I played in the best conference in the country last year and I shut down all these guys. You guys think you're going to really get more?
I'm shutting down Okai Ojabi, right? Like,
yeah, like good luck. Right. Like, and so that's where I'm with you on, like, maybe it's a mid-major piece. Maybe it's a different, like a Rob Finney veteran type of guy where he comes in and he knows what his role is and he's okay with playing 15 a game for a really good team. That's the most important thing if you add a backcourt piece. But honestly, if they add a front court piece and a couple other supplementary spots, I still like the backcourt. I really do. And there is something beneficial to putting these freshmen in the fire and letting them go to work. Think about how the development we saw from Ayo Dosunmu as a freshman. It wasn't all fun and games at the beginning of the year. There were times where he got frustrated and he was struggling to find his fit and his role, but he learned so much. And I don't think that that jump was unexpected. Like Trent Frazier grew a ton as a player throughout his freshman year because he got thrown into the fire. So I look at throwing Jaden Epps into the fire, throwing Sky Clark into the fire. Both those guys have the mentality and the mindset where they're not going to be nervous by those things. I don't think early season struggles make Sky Clark and Jaden Epps go, God, I'm a failure. I'm not a good player anymore. They're just not wired like that. So part of me wants to let them go to work, because you also have the benefit of Coleman Hawkins, RJ Melendez, Terrence Shannon Jr., and whoever else you add to the piece, where Sky Clark doesn't have to be the star. He could just be a really good supplementary piece. And like we've also saw last year, it's easier than ever these days for point guards to come in and start to be really, really solid Big Ten players. Chucky Hepburn came in right away at Wisconsin. And you could tell right away, he's not going to be scared. He's not going to be nervous at all. So I think that, I think they're more talented than Chucky Hepburn or have a higher upside than Chucky Hepburn, but that's like the similar type of role that they could potentially have.
All right, Isaac, the other Big Ten teams, who's won the offseason? As you look up in what they've added, Ohio State's added a really good recruiting class and some good transfers. We know Michigan's got a good recruiting class coming in, though they're not able to get Terrence Shannon. We'll see with Amani Bates. Doesn't sound like they're that interested in him, and that'd be an odd fit for me. Who else has won the offseason in your opinion?
Yeah, I think Michigan has won the offseason just because Hunter Dickinson is back.
Yeah,
that's 100%. Like right now,
we all won the offseason because Hunter Dickinson is back. Yeah. The villain we don't deserve, but the villain we need, right?
100%. And I think that he's going to be an all Big Ten player, player of the year. I would rather have him player of the year over. If Trace Jackson Davis returns, I would rather have Hunter Dickinson over player of the year. So I think they're definitely the winner. Jalen Llewellyn coming in from Princeton is a huge win. But the thing is it feels like a lot of the teams in the Big Ten have been really safe in the portal so far. Indiana's kind of been a little involved, but they haven't done a ton. Michigan State has not done anything, and I'm kind of worried about that. Purdue has lost a ton of pieces out of their backcourt. Eric Hunter Jr. even grad transferred. So they were supposed to get Nigel Pack, and now that obviously didn't happen.
I was going to say, I thought the biggest whiff so far has to be Purdue not landing that lead guard. You just got a top 5 pick in there. You got good pieces coming back, right? And you're not able to land that lead guard yet.
Well, and so there's still time though for June.
Yes.
That's where I'm saying, like, that's where it feels like this next month is huge for them, because they have such a huge hole there where they desperately need it. You know, I thought Tyrese Hunter from Iowa State would also be an unbelievable fit for Purdue, but it sounds like he's trending towards Kansas. So it feels like they need to find that piece. But another big winner of the offseason is definitely Minnesota. Their ability to get Dawson Garcia is huge. That's one of the number 2 rated player in Minnesota's recruiting history since 24/7 Sports was around. So like, that's like one of the best talents they've ever gotten. You look at Dawson Garcia and Jamison Battle next year, go, man, that's a little fun team. We could see what that works. I don't know if I love Ohio State's offseason yet. Tanner Holden is a nice addition from Wright State. Sean McNeil is a really nice player. We both really liked him at West Virginia last year, but I still have a lot of questions about that backcourt. And then the other one too that I keep thinking about is can Indiana find any shooting? They have got to find that in the next month, because I'm having conversation with some people and they have them as a top 20 team. And I'm just looking at some of the rosters or some of the lineups that they could play next year with TJD back. And I go, there's one shooter on the floor and Xavier Johnson doesn't count. Right. So like, it's an interesting offseason here. And I think we're going to learn a whole lot about these teams in the next month. Iowa has to find a big, Indiana has to find a shooter, and Michigan State needs to add somebody, because they're just not quite good enough right now to get over the hump, even if Max Christie comes back.
Yeah, with Indiana, I mean, there's a lot to like there. There's talent, but it continues to be shooting and playmaking for them, right? Like, and I know they got Tamar Bates going into his second year, former top 30 prospect, and the Shifiano kid who's a 5-star prospect, but they need those guys to be good right away. And, you know, Michigan's going to be interesting, man. Like if one or both of Houston and Diabate come back, sorry, Illinois fan, like they have to be the preseason favorite. Like Dickinson is an unbelievable player, even if you don't like him. And you know, I was surprised Frankie Collins went to the portal though. That one shocked me, because I liked what I saw from him late in the season, former top 50 prospect. So they basically seem to have traded Collins for Llewellyn, which I don't know if that's a win.
Yeah, no, that's a little bit weird. I was a little caught off guard by it. Some Michigan people weren't that caught off guard by it, but I still think that like that might be a little bit of Michigan bias slipping in. Oh no, we definitely didn't need, you know what I mean? Like that's not a good lot. Like you don't want to lose a top 50 point guard like that. So that's an interesting one. The guy too with that Houston Diabate thing, I kind of think Diabate might stay. Part of me thinks that he might stay in the NBA draft, and that might be a really good roll of the dice for some NBA team, because he's really talented and there's so much upside there. Like I look at what Jaren Jackson Jr. has done sometimes for Memphis this year, and I go, there's no reason why Diabate can't do some of those similar things. That's your guy, JJ.
I don't know if he could shoot like JJJ did in his freshman year.
Totally, but there's room for growth on that end with what he can do defensively and the ball handling, all that stuff. So like, but if Houston comes back, that's a big thing. And Houston and Christie are the 2 big ones, and Diabate. Those are the 3 big ones. And if 2 of those 3 guys come back, that really elevates the Big Ten next year, because you just need those wings and those pros to really compete in the NCAA tournament. And all 3 of those guys have huge upsides.
I mean, this is early, and this is the last thing before we wrap up, Isaac, but the Big Ten is there for the taking. I think, you know, outside of, I think Michigan, you know, Indiana could be good. Iowa could be good, but they got to add more in the portal and get Chris Murray back, of course. But it looks like a league that the top half, there's not going to be much separating.
No, I'm with you, man. I look at Ohio State has lost so much. You're looking at a team like Michigan State, who has lost some decent pieces, but let's be honest, Michigan State has been underwhelming for the last couple of years, and they don't necessarily have that high-end talent. So if you're Brad Underwood and you're this Illinois coaching staff, you go, okay, we're a piece away and the right development away from potentially being Big Ten champs again, because, you know, what's the path to get there? RJ Melendez has to take a step forward. No, he's not going to be a top 5 pick like Jaden Ivey or whatever, but if he needs to take a step forward. But I think if Coleman Hawkins transforms into an all defensive team type of candidate, maybe Big Ten defensive player of the year, Terrence Shannon Jr. does his thing, you add another piece and the freshmen start to play well. That's a roster that can really compete. Can you beat Michigan? You've beat them in the past. You'd have to prove it again. It's a whole different personnel. And let's be honest, Kofi Coburn was a really bad matchup for Hunter Dickinson. So that obviously changes things all the time. But you're giving yourself another bite at the apple, because the rest of this roster, the rest of the rosters in the Big Ten are not as athletic as Illinois. Illinois right now is the most comfortably the most athletic team in the Big Ten next year. And that's
new.
Something that hasn't happened in a long time.
Yeah, that's very new. Isaac Trotter, 24/7 Sports. Thanks for checking in, man. And whenever the next piece falls, we'll get you back on here, man. Appreciate it.
Sounds good. Anytime.